Good afternoon, everyone. We warmly welcome you to the 6th and latest roundtable organized by Bangladesh Institute of Peace and Security Studies and Dhaka Tribune. Today, our topic of discussion would be the emerging world order, how will Bangladesh navigate? And to discuss on that topic, we are very pleased to have two profound speakers among us, and I would very much like to request our President, Major General A.N.M. Muniruzzaman, to moderate the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And a very warm welcome to all of you distinguished participants, ambassadors, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon and assalamu alaikum. We are meeting here to discuss a topic which is extremely pertinent today, and that is the emerging world order. In particular, how should Bangladesh navigate this new order? As you'd agree with me that at the end of the Cold War, we perhaps temporarily came to a unipolar moment. And that unipolar moment did not last very long as we saw the forces of multipolarity coming into the play. Very recently, we also saw a strong push from emerging and powerful powers and rising global powers like China. But two events have completely shaken the international system. And that is COVID-19, which has brought the world to a turning point of its existing world order, and very recently the conflict in Ukraine. So therefore we see complete international order which is in a flux. New elements of fluidity has been injected into the system, and we don't know where it is going to shape up. As small powers, as middle powers, it is very pertinent for all of us to constantly study and monitor this international system so that we find our rightful place in our national interest. A definite trend of the new international world order is that the world is perhaps once again going to experience what we should call Cold War 2.0, in which the world perhaps will not be divided on ideological ground, but more pertinent for us to now talk about and see how the conflict in Ukraine is shaking the international system and where it ends. We have two very excellent panelists today, Mr. Touhid Hossain, who is our former Foreign Secretary, and Dr. Ali Ashraf, a professor of international relations from Dhaka University. Before I hand over the floor to them, some points about house rules. We are all speaking here on record, so it is not a Chatham House session. Whatever is spoken here will be recorded, and a complete video will be placed in the YouTube channel within the next 2 days. And I can also tell you that our Dhaka Tribune previous YouTube channel's presentations of this kind of sessions have had more than 100,000 views. So it is very widely viewed. And we'll also be, together with Dhaka Tribune, bringing up a one-page supplement of the whole proceedings of what we discuss here today. So with that very brief introduction, I hand over the floor to our first speaker, Mr. Touhid Hossain.
Thank you. Thank you, General Muniruzzaman. A friend of at least 22 years. We did our NDC together.
Yeah.
Okay. So, now the emerging world order. General Muniruzzaman has already spoken what has brought in the emergence of a new order, but what are the changes that have brought in that has shaken the world order? Of course, the last event he has mentioned, that is very important, but then he has also mentioned the rise of China. The rise of China as a dominant and assertive world power. Assertive I am saying because I can find from my observations that particularly for the last 10 years about, China is much more assertive than it used to be before that, for the previous 20 or 30 years. Although it was growing very fast, its influence was also growing, but it did not really assert itself. Here there is an irony of the Henry Kissinger's misjudgments of 1971. the USA of 1971, under his guidance and that of his president, had taken the side of a rather genocidal regime, rather than going in favor of the democratically elected elements. They had taken, they opened up to China because they thought that it's very important to have China as their ally against the Soviet Union, and thereby they paved the way for China to become, in these about 50 years, the real rival of the US. It is sure that the rise of China was inevitable. That would have happened in any case. But the support, the active support of the US has much quickened the process, and China is at least 20 years ahead of what it would have been without the US support. The Western design now to contain China, the Indo-Pacific strategy, the Quad, the AUKUS. Indo-Pacific strategy, this has been there for quite some time, being spoken about, but then the Quad is a relatively recent phenomenon. And then from September 2021, we have the AUKUS. Suddenly it came up. And on the AUKUS, I would, with Mr. General Muniruzzaman's permission, I would just quote him. He had written a piece in Pratham Alo on this. And very rightly he has said that AUKUS could destabilize the regional and sub-regional strategic balance that currently prevails in this region. In fact, this was an event in which had very adverse repercussions both in Asia and in Europe. The French were furious because they had already put quite a bit of money in the submarines that they were supposed to provide to Australia, whereas suddenly they found that the deal is being cancelled, and Germany came up in support of France. So we can see that as we look at the West, on each and every issue they may not be on the same plane. Two very important countries, Germany and France, came out against the AUKUS. The third point is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has already been mentioned, and this definitely is going to change a lot of things. Now, apart from the health issues, what the COVID-19 showed? It showed that the over-dependence of the world on China for its consumer goods and intermediate goods can be potentially dangerous. Because when there was problem and then there was this shutting down of the factories in China, the problem of communication, the ships were not moving with the goods, and the whole world was in a jittery. This should not have happened, because the problem had started only in China at that time, and that had shaken the entire world. So there is a lesson to be learned here. A small point, but I think can have some effects also on the new realities, which is the virtual defeat and retreat of the US from Afghanistan. Very quickly, the Taliban occupied what they had lost 20 years back, and this could have ramifications in the region and beyond, because it is a completely different type of government that we have now in Afghanistan, although not recognized by the world, but then it's a reality. You recognize it or not, it is there. You are not going to be able to remove it. The Americans tried for 20 years and then failed. Now comes the question of the last one, the war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine. Well, our Russian friends don't want to use the term war, but then if we look at it by any means, it's a war. There are quite a few lessons to be learned from this conflict. Nobody ever believed that these two countries will be at war, because they have such good friendly relations for such a long time, similar history, and the tussle about whether Nikolai Gogol was a Russian or a Ukrainian, etc., etc., so close culturally, even economically and otherwise. And then there has been a conflagration between the two countries. So there is a lesson here for, as you say, the lesser powers, the intermediate powers, that no relation is sacrosanct. No relation can guarantee you, no level of friendship can guarantee you that there will never be a conflict between you two. Other lesson that comes in, even a much weaker country like Ukraine can withstand a much stronger country's conflicts with unity and support from outside. Whether we agree or not, all of us may not agree, but then apparently the Russian plans have not worked. They plan to overrun the country very quickly, have a pro-Russian government there. Russia never said this, but that is the speculation that's going on. That did not succeed. So, and an important offshoot of this conflict has been Germany. For 75 years, Germany has been pacifist, very peaceful, etc. For the first time, they have decided to exceed their defense budget by more than 2% of their GDP. And they have already taken a plan for military modernization, which they had not been doing for after their defeat in the World War II. So these are the things that are happening in the world. Well, how will Bangladesh navigate? We come to that point, okay? Now we have to look at the Bangladesh realities. It's completely different from what it was in the 70s and 80s. Absolutely aid-dependent country. More than 7% of GDP came from aid. In fact, there was a time when our the aid, volume of aid was more than the development budget, which means that the aid even went into the the normal budget of paying salaries and things like that. We have really come a long way from that. It's less than 1% now, the aid, and now the business, investment, exports, these are much more important now. Exports reached $1 billion only in 86, 87. And now it is more than $40 billion. Tremendous improvements Bangladesh has made in all these aspects. In social sector also, you know that it's the only Muslim country apart from Turkey where you have gender parity in primary education enrollment. And we are about to achieve this in the secondary stage also. So things have improved a lot. But that doesn't mean that everything is very, very smooth. We have the institutions in our country are undergoing a very bad phase. In most of the areas, we are, in many cases we are going back. We have in democracy, in human rights, and the indicators that are there all over the world by reliable, quote-unquote, institutions that they make it, we have done badly. Then what are our relations with the neighborhood? Most important relations, of course, is with India and next with China. And with these countries, we have been able to maintain a balance. I would say that very well balanced, because both these countries are close friends of us, although they have an adversarial relation with each other. So we must say that we have done this quite well. For India, we have an excellent relation for quite some time, but they have a huge trade balance with us. We have helped them to take care of their insurgent groups in the northeastern states. We have given them the access to the northeastern states over our territory. These are fine, but then there are some unhappiness among the population in Bangladesh, because our steps that we took, it is believed that those have not been reciprocated by the Indians. And, that the trust that is the basis of relationship between any two countries, that has actually affected the trust of the Bangladeshi people in India. There are also some minor irritants like the Citizenship Amendment Act, which equates Bangladesh with Pakistan and Afghanistan. Then there is this Citizenship Register of Assam, which excludes many of the Bengali speakers in that state. So these are irritants, but of course, I think the one that affects the popular psyche most is the killing of civilians in the border by the Border Security Force of India. This does not happen anywhere in the world in peaceful borders, except peaceful and friendly countries' borders, except Bangladesh and India. Well, people say that the relations have passed the test of time, but the test of time is a continuous process. Time doesn't stay static. China, we have economic relations, very important economic relations. China understands that and aware of our relations with India, because China is pragmatist. They are very practical. They know that relation between Bangladesh and India has to be close because of geographical, historical, and other reasons. So this is the overall environment that Bangladesh acts. Bangladesh follows its foreign policies, its defense policies, and everything. So now there are a number of challenges that Bangladesh faces, not only vis-a-vis the security situation, but also otherwise. For example, we have a large population, and we are in a period of demographic dividend, because we have a very large proportion of the young people. But unfortunately, the quality of human resource is very poor, for which some of our workers, we have close to between 8 and 10 million people working abroad. But they are some of the lowest paid in the world because of the skill shortages. So this is one challenge that we need to face, because if you have to be an important player, if you have to be a mid-level power or in the high table, we have to be powerful. And being powerful doesn't mean only the military. You need to have the economic power, you need to have the knowledge power, etc., etc. And there we are somewhat lacking. The internet speed in our country is dismally low, which is also not doesn't go very well for us. The basis of our economic prosperity, we have seen 25 years of very good growth, but the basis has some weaknesses. One is that the job of the huge army of garments workers, much of it is going to be taken over by artificial intelligence and robotics in the next 10 to 15 years. We are really not prepared to upgrade ourselves so that this loss can be covered up very easily. So this is one point. Economically, it's a challenge for us. Remittance, it's good, but then, as I said, that there is limit to the work and remittance of the unskilled workers that we are sending. Unless we improve our human resource quality, this might become a challenge. Agriculture is doing very well, but also we have the problem of overcropping and nutritional depletion, etc., etc. We are good on balance of payment so far, but our good friend Professor Mustafiz of CPD, he has given us 9 points. I will not spell out those, which may put us in a debt trap in the long run. And once you are stuck in the middle income trap, it's very difficult to get out of it. There is no record of any country which has fallen into that trap and then gone out of it. And we have a genuine risk of getting into that. In fact, India is in this trap. Vietnam is in this trap. Even Malaysia, Brazil, Argentina in the upper middle income trap. They have not been able to move out of that in many years, 33 years. Now coming to the real conflicting things, that the conflicting relationship that has developed in the region between the U.S., China, and India, this conflicting situation, that puts us in a bad situation, because Bangladesh enjoys excellent relations with all these three countries, all these three powers, but they have their own problems, and there is although the government would not agree, but then we know that there has been pressure for us to join one of the sides, and we cannot afford to do that, plain and simple, at this moment. We don't know what will happen after 20 years, but then right at this moment, we are not in a position to take one side and make others our enemies. So I think, last of all, we have the Rohingya issue. For us, it's a huge challenge, and then our planning security, economy, society for the next 10, 15, 20 years, we have to factor in the Rohingya issue, because that is going to affect us adversely and very strongly. We all know the history, so I'm not going into that, but then the solution to this problem can only come from what the Prime Minister said in the UN General Assembly, and what Kofi Annan Commission had said. They have 88 recommendations. But there is no progress whatsoever in the last 4 years in that direction, and that is a serious security problem for us. And it is, by the day, it is becoming more security problem, because even internal security within the camps has become an issue these days. Now, we expected China to help us in this respect. China has excellent relations with both the countries, with both Myanmar and Bangladesh. But unfortunately, that has not been forthcoming. There has been an initiative for tripartite dialogue under the, some sort of a little bit under the auspices of the Chinese, but that has also not really worked out very well. But let me mention this, that China has its own interests to pursue. China.
Wind up in next 1 minute.
Okay, I can do that. Okay. Some important developments have taken place in this area with the National Unity Government, and they have, for the first time, mentioned the Rohingyas as Rohingyas. So I think that is one important development that has taken place, although the National Unity Government is not going to defeat the Tatmadaw and come to power. So what are our options then? I think the important thing for us is to look for new friends. I just put it bluntly like that. Well, it doesn't mean that we make enemy of our friends. No, they remain our friends, but we need other friends who would help us overcome this problem and take care of our position. We need to, of course, invest in human resource. We have to try to become an alternate source of, I think with the industrial development of the last 30 years, has taken us to a position where we can partially substitute China as provider of consumer goods to the world. And this is one area in which we should seek cooperation from others. But I just would make one small point and stop, which is that militarily, we need to develop a minimum deterrence capability, which in my opinion we do not have now. Although most people do not think that that is very important, but I believe this is important. And in this respect, I think one area where we can explore is Europe. I'm not speaking about the US and China and India, who are directly involved in mutual conflicts, but Europe is somewhat different from the Western center of power, which is the US. And so I think that in our quest for strategic thinking, in our strategic improvement of our situation, we can perhaps look at Europe, and maybe we can go into bigger details in question and answer sessions. Thank you so much. I'm not taking too much time here.
Okay. Touhid, thank you very much for your very excellent analysis of the system. And we do note that you have mentioned that our aid dependence on foreign aid has drastically gone down over the last years and decades. But what has gone up is our market dependence. So we cannot be devolved from the international system. Our market dependence of our ready-made garments and other export items indicates that we have to be very careful in articulating our international relationships and remain within the system. COVID-19 must be factored in as we see our relationship evolving with many countries and regions. We also see a potential threat to multilateralism, and that is something we have to take note of. There are elements of geopolitics which is coming back to the fore again, and the Westphalian state system that has endured for many years is once again under threat. So there are new elements of uncertainty that are completely unknown to the international system, and for which countries like Bangladesh must take note of. We must also be aware of the forces of geotechnology that has certainly a big role to play in forging international relationships, bilateral relationships, and how the international system functions. So these are some of the elements that we have to take note of. But to talk about these and much more, I invite the next speaker, Dr. Ali Ashraf, Professor of International Relations in Dhaka University. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. I think it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be able to speak to such an informed audience and on such an interesting topic that concerns the emerging new world order. And the key question is, how is Bangladesh likely to navigate through these changes and transformations in the world order? Being an academic, we always try to be theoretical and more abstract theorization of empirical events are our expertise, and but the topic requires much more substantive discussions on policy areas. So I will try to come out of my comfort zone of being an academic and be more pragmatic in terms of engaging the audience with some of the practical issues. My previous speaker got 20 minutes, and I think with the equator principle, I will be getting approximately. Maybe I'll try to finish much earlier, although 10 minutes is the time limit. Let me divide I would say statement or my remarks into 5 broad thematic areas. First, I'll try to talk about what world order is all about, and then talk about historical transformations in the world order, then come to the point like what emerging world order really means, because the floor might have different definitions, and then talk about the national aspirations and interest of Bangladesh, which is the end goal, and then the ultimate question would be how we are going to navigate to reach the destination and the end goals. So to begin with the world order. And IR theorists are notoriously divided on the definition of world order, because we don't agree on what the world order actually is all about. There are 3 broad schools of thought: the realists, the liberals, and the Marxists. And the realists define world order in terms of power politics. And the central argument is that we need to look at the international system and how military power is divided, I mean the distribution of power, and then if power is distributed between 2 major actors, we call it a bipolar system. If power is concentrated in the hands of a single superpower, we call it a unipolar system. If it is divided and distributed among more than 2 countries and 2 power blocks, we call it a multipolar system. And that is a very dominant framing of the concept of world order. And secondly, the liberals see things a little more differently. And the argument is that it is not only power politics that leads countries to conflicting situations, rather it is global governance systems, multilateral interdependence. So while the realist scholars look at major actors and their military capabilities and their conflict-producing behaviors, liberals look more at international institutions and the way they provide platforms for negotiations, diplomacy, and more international cooperation. So the liberals focus on the international institutions like World Bank, IMF, WTO, which regulate global economic governance, and the UN, which was established for promoting international peace, security, and stability. So the realists are pessimists and the liberals are optimists. The third school of thought that comes from the Marxist theory defines world order in terms of economic inequalities between the rich and the poor nations. And the dominant argument is that the world order is precisely an economic world order, and here we see more and more exploitation of the proletariat by the rich, And it is the multinational corporations that are the main actors of these exploitations, and their headquarters are mostly in the global north. So these three theoretical frameworks provide three very competing visions of the definition of world order. So that's the theoretical part. Secondly, the question is, has the world order remained constant, or it has transformed over the years? And here we see that we more or less agree that during the Cold War period, the world was bipolar. The world order or the international system was bipolar. The Soviet and the American blocs dominated the East-West confrontation. The Western bloc was led by the United States, the Eastern bloc led by the Soviet Union and East Central and East European countries. So a new world order began in the 1990s after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the demise of the Warsaw Pact. And since the 1990s, we almost thought that that we are going to live in an unlimited era of liberty, democracy, good governance, prosperity, and civilizational wisdom. And it was really a time like the third wave of democratization swept over Europe. Many of the former Central and East European autocracies, transformed, and partly they transformed not only because of their domestic imperatives, but also they wanted to be part of the West. And the search for being part of the West led to the expansion of NATO and the EU. So the new world order, I mean, we saw that in the post-Cold War era, it saw the emergence of the United States to be the lone superpower, and Russia losing the superpower status, becoming remaining the great power. Then 9/11 happened, and a kind of global systemic transformation we almost were witnessing, and the global war on terrorism becoming another buzzword in defining the world order. And in the global war on terrorism, we saw that the threat was not a nation state, rather a transnational terrorist phenomenon. Al-Qaeda becoming the major threat, and then ISIS becoming another threat, both transnational but having lots of significant influence at the domestic level on the homegrown extremist networks and also their regional allies. So what happened in the post 9/11 era is that there were new references to new medievalism, as if the world order has become similar to what happened in the Middle Ages, like violent extremism, transnational organized crime, human trafficking, state fragility. All of these things were creating lots of tensions in the world. I mean, and also the basic perimeter of the world order has always been the Westphalian order, as General Munir has said, that we live in a system of sovereign nation states that was originated in 1648 with the Treaty of Westphalia. Despite all these systemic transformations from Cold War to post-Cold War, from pre-9/11 to post-9/11, the basic order and its ordering principles and features remain the same. We respect modern nation state, whether we condemn the aggressors or not condemn, we believe in this organizing principle. So what happened in the post-9/11 era is the Westphalian state came under attack from multiple sources of threats. It is not only the nation state, but also the non-state actors becoming a source of the threat. So I defined the world order, the historical transformations, and then the next question is what is it, the new and the emerging world order? That is the topic for today. And my argument is that there is no time limit in this definition of emerging. If we start from the 1990s, then the big question would be whether we are still living in a unipolar world or a bipolar world or a multipolar world. But I think this Ukraine crisis has given a new meaning to this term, emerging world order. And living in this context, I mean, since the 24th of February 2022, with the Russian, we can call invasion of Ukraine, special operations in Ukraine, doesn't matter. The question is the world order, are we witnessing a transformation in the world order? And if yes, the question is, how is Bangladesh going to navigate? So let us try to see what is happening since the February Ukraine crisis. Initially, long before the Russian war against Ukraine or the special ops against Ukraine, we have seen the deployment of a large scale, nearly 200,000 of Russian troops in the Ukrainian eastern border. And then all on a sudden, in a few weeks, we have seen that the Donbass region, comprising Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine, predominantly populated by the Russian-speaking people who had been having insurgent movements since 2014, right after Crimea was annexed by Russia, right? Those two predominantly pro-Russia speaking people populated region declared kind of autonomy or / independence, and the Russia recognized it, and followed by special military attacks and war. And then we see a new kind of polarization in the world system, right? And in this new polarization, we have seen that the United States got its predominant in NATO allies, France, Germany, mostly, and also Ukraine's neighbors like Poland to be on the side, while Russia has managed to court the friendship of China and India. And so there are newer talks about whether we are witnessing a third world war or whether we are witnessing a new world order. And you know, General Munir has referred to it as a Cold War 2.0, as if that we are witnessing a new Cold War between the American bloc of democracies versus the pro-Russia camp, which includes China dominantly and also India. So the question is, you know, what are the implications of these new dynamics on a country like Bangladesh? That is the substantive part of the discussions. So let us try to understand the foreign policy aspirations of Bangladesh, and then what are the national interests and what are the expectations, and then we can see how these external events are going to constrain our choices and interest. And also, one should recognize that foreign policy aspirations do not remain constant. Rather, they change over time. As Ambassador Touhid has rightly pointed that, you know, we have made a lot of progresses. And, well, if we begin with 1971, immediately after the independence of the country, our primary aspirations were getting as much recognition as we can get. And then secondly, reconstruction. Post-war country needed reconstruction. So here we see that, you know, our concentration was more about investing our diplomatic energy in getting recognition and economic reconstruction. So foreign aid was a priority, getting the support of as many countries as we can. Today, if we fast forward 50 years later, our priority is our aspiration is to become a developing country. So let us have a quick look at the checklist of what we prioritize. RMG, ready-made garment exports, is one of our, I mean, it is the leading source of our foreign exchange earnings, and also remittances from the migrant workers. So the biggest challenge for Bangladesh is to diversify the export basket. And as Ambassador Touhid has rightly said, that we also have to anticipate the way these artificial intelligence, robotic machines can displace the human labor. Although I have spoken to more than a dozen RMG producers, and I understand that these AI, the artificial intelligence or automated machines are coming very slow. The oven sector has become fully automated partly, but the niche sector, the substantial part of the RMG sector is yet to be fully automated, partly because it is investment. It requires heavy investment, and we don't see that much investment coming at the moment. So maybe that is a near-term concern, not the immediate concern today. But what is a matter of concern is we need to diversify our export earnings, and also moving from this low-cost RMG tailoring to high-cost, high-end products manufacturing. On top of that, we need more skilled training and also a rights-friendly RMG governance system. Secondly, in terms of the remittance earning source, the labor migration, the Saudi Arabia and the UAE are the top sources of our top destinations for the Bangladeshi migrant workers. We do have Singapore, Malaysia, and some East Asian countries to be our newer destinations, but bigger challenge is to diversify the market for the labor migrants, and another challenge is to so we need to sustain the existing market and then explore the newer markets, and there has been some very minor progresses. There's also a need for investing in human skills development, the soft skills, because most of the remittance earners in Bangladesh are actually low-skilled cleaners, construction workers, and There is 10 to 12% female migrant workers, most of which are actually in the domestic servitude, I mean domestic houseworks, and most of them are the victims of huge human rights abuses. So our challenge is also to promote, to regulate and improve the good governance in the labor migration sector. The third foreign policy priority, I would say, and I completely agree with him, that the Rohingya refugee issue, and we have seen a polarization of our neighbors, China and India, taking Myanmar's side, and the West, including Australia, United States, Canada, and the Netherlands supporting us in terms of holding Myanmar accountable in the International Court of Justice. So what we can possibly expect is that, investing our diplomatic energy to get these Asian giant neighbors on our side, and also because what we expect is that repatriation of 1.1 million Rohingyas is one of the topmost priorities, and bilateral diplomacy has failed. We did internationalize it by going to the UN. The Prime Minister's speech has appealed. The UNHCR has made global appeals, but this Ukrainian refugee crisis is going to displace the Rohingya refugee crisis at the top agenda in the global refugee debates. So there is a need for constant sensitizing the international community on this thing. Defense modernization definitely is one of our top priorities, and there is no doubt. And on this question, I think there has been repeated discussions of diversifying our sources of the weapons and equipments, and there are valid reasons for that, because there's a need for equipping us with the superior technologies, and definitely the cost is a factor as well, because it is not that we can go to the market and buy new weapons. There is a need for also funding, looking for alternative sources of money. Bangladesh is a leading provider of the UN peacekeeping forces, and I think it is also in our top national interest to maintain this leading position in the global security provider scenario. And here, what we witness is there are multiple challenges in terms of peacekeeping missions are becoming increasingly riskier. Mali being the worst example. So here, what is the tension is that we believe in traditional peacekeeping, where we are reluctant to use force, but the newer missions are becoming riskier, demanding use of force. So what we witness is that not only Bangladesh, its South Asian neighbors, Indian and Pakistani peacekeepers also see that the Nordic countries, smaller troop contributing nations, are increasingly adopting what is called a robust peacekeeping model, where they don't hesitate to use force, but the challenge is that you can always you can always antagonize the local forces, rebel forces, and which is going to produce more casualties. But the fact that the Bangladeshi contingents, part of the UN contingents, often are co-located with the French and the European contingents, and then that they are doing robust peacekeeping, we are doing traditional peacekeeping. So if they antagonize the rebels, we take the hit as well. So these things are perennial issues, this migration, RMG, Rohingya issues, peacekeeping, plus we've got a new priority, which is counterterrorism. We want to be in the good books of the international society. And violent extremism has been a challenge in Bangladesh since the late 90s. And we have seen that more than 100 attacks and 4 major groups. And then some of them were either inspired by external groups or either motivated. We deny the linkage, fine. But inspirational linkage is also very vital. So our priorities have so far been modernizing the capabilities of the law enforcement and the intelligence agencies, and also thinking of how military forces could be the last resort, the holy artisan being the last example. We had to deploy the para-commando battalions there. So given all this scenario, let us talk about what is our priority and how we navigate. There's a naval connotation here. Navigate much like how I'm going to cross this path and go there where my target and desired goals are there. Well, this is interesting because when it came to, let's say, the 2 votes in the UN General Assembly, right, on early March and late March, yeah. Let's call it simple. We abstained and then we voted. But look at the text of the UN General Assembly resolutions. Let me. The first resolution, there were some strong wordings calling Russia to immediate, complete, unconditional withdrawal. Now, this is, being a student of IR, I go back to the theories and I see that this is a very liberal expectation. that, and it sounds good because sovereignty is a cardinal principle in the international order, and we want countries to respect sovereignty. So what Russia has done is precisely a violation of the sovereignty of Ukraine. My Russian friends, you don't like me, fine, but this is fact because it is going to create a dangerous precedent in the world order. I mean, a small country and your foreign policy don't like it, it wants to join NATO, fine, but diplomacy could be the last resort. Well, fine. Then the war began, and maybe as a student of IR, I thought that, well, taking Donbas region, Russia would be happy. But the way it is moving to multiple directions and demanding Zelensky to collapse and reinstating Viktor Yanukovych as a puppet regime, these are definitely precedences, and many countries, even China and India, will not like it. Trust me, because they also have their ethnic insurgencies. So the facade that we are witnessing, the way China and India are calculating their economic gains by getting closer to Russia has multiple meanings. For us, we do understand that these were strong wordings, and Bangladesh remain abstain from the voting. And the Prime Minister today gave a strong rationale, which I think she was very frank by saying that, also referring to Russian tremendous contribution during the 1971 liberation war. So this historical reference to Russia, and the fact that Russia has been one of the best energy partners for Bangladesh. The Rupur nuclear power plant is being constructed, and 90% of the funding coming from Russia with state credits, right? And let's be frank and candid. Once these reactors are installed and the electricity is connected to the power grid, Bangladesh is going to be dependent on Russia for the next 50 years, because an average life longevity for a nuclear power plant is, let's say, 40 to 50 years. It's a VVER generation 3+ technology, which is a superior technology. Meaning, perhaps one reason for Bangladesh to remain abstinent in the UN voting is that we did not antagonize the relations to a point where this power plant is going to be affected, partly because energy security is also in our top priority. But then look at the next resolution's wording. It refers more to humanitarian protection, creating a safe zone for humanitarian civilians, Ukrainian civilians, plus humanitarian protection providers, and as well as journalists, doctors, and others. And I think there is valid reason to be siding with humanitarianism. But these two voting behavior of Bangladesh indicates, and also it reminds us of the IR theories, that humanitarianism and national interest would be the two defining principles for our voting behavior in the international political system when it comes to dealing with Russia. Let me conclude. So we have, what I'm trying to argue is that despite all these high politics debates, like whether we are going to be in the Chinese axis or the Russian axis or the American, I think we got multiple competing demands from our engagement with international partners. Remember I said that RMG is our top source of earnings, roughly $40 billion. And most of it goes to the United States, and in fact, a bigger chunk of our RMG products go to the European Union markets, where Germany, France, and the neighbors are and UK as well are our biggest destinations. So do you want to antagonize that RMG market as well? The answer is no, meaning that we have to strike a balance between managing our trading relations with the West, at the same time maintaining our good relations with these Russian energy supplies, and keeping in mind that China is one of our strongest defense partners, and with India we have got borders in 3 sides. So these geopolitical realities, these geo-economic compulsions, and our calculations of the global systemic transformations, all of these will require us to navigate in a way that requires more pragmatism and a balance between national interest and humanitarianism. And often these two don't complement, rather contradict, because the pursuit of national interest is often require you to vote against or remain silent on the question of humanity and sovereignty principles. So I think that here comes the question of PR campaign, public relations. I mean, the diplomacy has to be good enough to communicate credibly that, look, we are taking principled position, but not at the cost of the national interest. So I think that for a country like Bangladesh, there's a need for more pragmatism, more proactive articulation of the national interest, and I think that and also there are lots of challenges of good governance and democracy. Definitely we need to also be in the good books of the international community by improving our records in human rights, good governance, and democracy. I think I'll be stopping here, and then we'll be can have more discussion in the Q&A. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ashraf. As you very rightly said, that it is a tough navigation. Not many sailors can navigate a sea as complex as the international system is today. Particularly, Bangladesh will have to find its way out as to how to balance between BRI, of which we are a signatory, and our aspirations to be in Indo-Pacific strategy. These are becoming competing strategies of two very different camps, and it is not easy for a nation to be in both. So therefore, these are some of the compulsions that Bangladesh will have to face, and a pragmatic approach to adopting a national policy, keeping in our national interest in view, is perhaps the best way to go. But I don't know how far our very foundations of our foreign policy goals or dictums, friendship to all, malice to none, how far and how long it can survive the test is a question. I open the floor now for your questions and comments, observations. Please feel free to say anything, and we'll be happy to pass them back to our panelists for them to give their comments and answers. Please raise your hand, and I will come to you as I see the hands. Let me have a look around the room first. I will first go to you, sir. Air Vice Marshal, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank both the speakers for their wonderful presentation. In fact, the professor has talked about three types of order. First one is your realist order from theoretical point of view. When it comes to realist order, then I would say that for Bangladesh to navigate is to have a very strong military deterrence. It was a lack of deterrence that probably had encouraged Myanmar to push in the Rohingya refugees to Bangladesh. If you look up the north, then we see that there is a place called Chumbi Valley up north in Indian territory, and if there is kind of minor or major conflict between China and India, then that neutrality would be breached and Bangladesh will lose some of its territory because of suffering from the Belgian syndrome that happened in 1914 when Belgium was violated by the German troops by the Schlieffen Plan. The second one is the liberal order, which relates to the economic development. For that, if we look at the region, we have talked about the global order, but we don't, we must also talk about the South Asian order. And if we want a liberal order in South Asia, then Bangladesh has to come very closer to India and the other states of South Asia in terms of intra-regional trade. And finally, when it comes to a Marxian order, and the most important thing is to build institutions. Institutions in which the distribution of justice at least is guaranteed to the common people. I was the High Commissioner of Bangladesh in Brunei Darussalam, and there I have seen how the expatriate workers are exploited. That means we do not have a proper institution for managing their treatment abroad. We always say that we get a lot of money in terms of remittance from these kind of legal expatriate workers, but the point is that their political cost or social cost is very high. We never, in fact, take into account the political cost of human existence involved in earning remittances. So these are the three important things. We must have a strong military deterrence posture. Second one is that we have to come closer to India and the other states of South Asia in terms of inter-regional trade. And third, we have to build institutions. There are no alternate to institutions. If I don't feel confident enough that I have a right to give my vote independently, then probably the very existence of individual, so far the ontological context of order is concerned, is jeopardized. Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Ruhul Amin. Have been a student of the Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. I'm very sorry for late and for not being able to listen to your presentation, Zaman Bhai. and Ashraf's wonderful presentation on the emerging world order and how Bangladesh will navigate. And so far I understand Ashraf has raised the issues that are very prominent from historical point of view. So the topic, the emerging world order, how Bangladesh will navigate, is an issue of international relations today. And how we do analyze and understand international relations, there are two ways. We know one is historical way, another is ontological. Historically, how the global society is running, the way nation state we see today was not the nation state or global society before. We are in a global society where nation states are interacting or non-nation states are interacting is a result of the Westphalian system. Like Westphalian system collapsed after the League of Nations, and like United Nations, I don't know, seems to be collapsing possibly after the failure of League of Nations. So international relations need to be understood more from historical than from ontological point of view. Problem for Bangladesh's diplomacy and our foreign policy is that we don't know to what directions our diplomacy or foreign policy needs to be geared up. Ontologically, there is lack of scarcity of resources, understanding, projects, formulation policies, and also diplomatic practices. So that's my observation. So if I look at this situation, I want to understand it from ontological point of view. Ashraf has raised an issue of the war on terror. I guess after Russian attack on Ukraine, the concept of war on terror seems to be taking a new turn in the understanding of international relations, both from ontological point of view and from historical point of view. I don't personally believe that the war on terror is an academic topic. However, it's a political topic, and it has imposed concept by the West on the non-West. I would say the Euro-American Western scholars has created, manufactured this concept called war on terror, targeting their enemies. Like my Russian friends, if they are here, when Russia was under communism, following the Bolshevik revolutions, USSR, USSR, was considered as the loathsome creature by United States of America. You know, Marshall Plan, Truman Doctrine, even creation of NATO was targeted to prevent USSR's communism. And after collapse of USSR, demise of USSR, and the defunct of communism as a political ideology, Western world needed a new threat, and they manufactured non-Western emerging ideologies. And so, ontologically speaking, they manufactured the type of war on terror. For example, Afghanistan issue. The Afghan freedom fighters, I'm a citizen of Bangladesh, you know all of history of Bangladesh. In 1971, our liberation war was considered as a secessionist war. And America supported, American foreign policy, American government supported that. And we are considered as the terrorists. Our freedom fighters were considered as the terrorists. The creation of, even the architect of our independence, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, was arrested. And there was a case like Agartala conspiracy case against Bangabandhu and his close associates. They were in jail. And there was 25 searchlight crisis of Bangladesh was created through a struggle.
If you please keep it short,
yeah,
so we can
I'm making sure. So such case happened in the case of Afghanistan. So Afghan freedom fighters were also considered as the terrorists. As an academic student of IR, I believe that the war on terror seems to be defined in a new way. Now, whether the Russians will be considered as the terror or who will be considered as the war on terror, you have said that Russian attack. Russia needs to be concerned about Russian security also. Russia thinks that through Ukraine, NATO can get into in a position that will create a threat to Russia. So I'm not supporting Russian attack on Ukraine, but I'm supporting that Russian security concerns. Second, what would be Bangladesh? So ontologically, as I said, there is no resource. Ontologically, Bangladesh needs to proceed with this ontological point of view. And if you see from foreign policy perspective, if you want, Bangladesh must look at pragmatic, what Bangabandhu said, friendship to all, malice to none. Our prime concern of foreign policy is economic diplomacy. So what would be our economic diplomacy needs to be fine-tuned in the in the changing in realities of emerging international order. So what Bangladesh diplomats or our foreign policy will proceed needs to be practiced, understood, researched, theorized, and analyzed based on the ontological insights of understanding the emerging issue. Without doing that, if we proceed, that will be a great error for Bangladesh foreign policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your very elaborate question and your comments. That was the chairman of Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. So it is a scholarly comment. All big scholars are modest. So the next question, please. Zaid, please.
But let me just comment on 2 points. First, I congratulate Professor from Dhaka University for making one very important point about how Bangladesh peacekeeping missions face a sort of a dual challenge. I was in Mali until last year, operating from Kidal, commanding a contingent. And we had the Barkhane forces and the French forces, the European forces, part of it.
Aviation University.
And of course, our contingents, Bangladesh peacekeepers. But I would rather sort of correct in one area. It's not actually much of a problem of robustness. Bangladesh do conduct robust peacekeeping because it's a Chapter 7 peacekeeping missions. It's much to do with the mandate that certain elements, for example, the Barkhane forces has, the EUTM has. So a much more detailed insight is required to make sort of these assertions. The Barkhane operates to a different UN Security Council mandate. MINUSMA operates through a different Security Council mandate. The Barkhane has a particular task of counterterrorism role, which is specific in their mandate. And the MINUSMA, which the peacekeepers, in which there is Bangladesh, there is also French, there is also Swedish, they operate, do not have a counterterrorism mandate, but a robust peacekeeping role. So when we use this particular jargons, that's what I wanted to. And this is where I actually came into contact with one of our wonderful diplomat, Rababa Fatima, who is our permanent representative. I had the distinct honor of working in some issues with her. And that is why I will come to the second point of the UN voting, which Touhid sir has rightly said. Actually, we should not, diplomacy and foreign policy is not emotion-based, it's objective, interest-based. And there is a study actually done, one by me, which takes into consideration of Bangladesh's voting records from 1990 to 2019. It was published in the International Journal. That's why probably most Bangladeshi scholars do not know. With specific findings was Bangladesh's vote at the UN General Assembly, in which currently Rababa Fatima is our permanent representative, and a very prudent, excellent ambassador. It has always been on the text, on the merit of the text. Let me give you one concrete evidence. You'd imagine all the human rights resolutions on Myanmar, the Bangladesh voting position was supposed to be with the majority. It was not. It was not. Bangladesh voted yes on the Myanmar resolution at the UNGA only when the resolution wording explicitly mentioned Bangladesh as an affected country. So when we question about our diplomats' prudence, we must also go into that deep into the facts of the matter. Why didn't they vote yes and go with the majority, which was supposed to be our conventional wisdom, that we should condemn what is going on in Myanmar? So that is also needs to be absolved up to that details before we sort of take into, make a sort of an assertion that, okay, this is what we should be doing. So that was my comment. The particular question to the professor is, he touched on the global governance tools, and this probably, sir, it'll be worth pointing that global governance tools originates from two different platforms. One is multilateral platform, which we have seen from the UNSC, sanction lists, economic LDC, cooperation stimulus package and all these. It has been historically so for Namibia, from South Africa, And now we have seen a proliferation of this sort of state-centric sanction list appearing to be globalized, to make it as a global governance tool. So do you, and I'm not questioning the legitimacy. Each state has the legitimate right to make his or her rule to be global. But the fundamental question is whether such proliferation of state-centric tools to make it a global governance tool is going to fuel more multipolarization. And if so, what does the small state like us do to battle us and to isolate us or insulate us from such regimes, which are not highly legitimate, for example?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next question is going to be from our young participant, and is Sean. Just to introduce him, Sean is an Erasmus scholar from University of Glasgow who has just joined BIPSS 2 days back as an international intern. Sean, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Oh, that's loud. I just have a sort of short question, just something for us all to reflect on, and I'd appreciate any comments from anyone. In this potentially more multipolar world that we might see in the decades coming forwards, what opportunities do you think that smaller nations and middle powers in the global south will have to challenge this neo-colonial relationships we've seen over the last few years? Particularly I'm thinking of vaccine inequality between the global north and the global south, climate change and the continued extraction of resources. So I'm wondering if in this multipolar reality we might see there may be more opportunities for these smaller powers to challenge that reality. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I just would like to ask Touhid a question, if I may. From our childhood, we have learned about morality, about what is good, what is bad. But whenever I come to this type of program, I really don't find the necessity why our teachers beat us up so mercilessly to teach us rights and wrongs. So, I mean, we always talk about national interest, national security, but we never talk about national morality. I mean, do these types of words disappear from our world against the background of geopolitical realities? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Please be brief because we are coming to the end now. So, Rushdie, you can ask your question. Please be very brief.
I have some question to our ex-foreign secretary. As probably our Russian friends have left, the maximum equipments of our Bangladesh Air Force and many of our Bangladesh Army, like our armored personnel carriers, like our ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, and our Yak-130 ground attack aircraft, then Mi-17 helicopters and MiG-29. These all are from Russia. So we aligned with Russia and China basically to get our armaments. Now, if you consider the Myanmar scenario, China and Myanmar are both the suppliers of Myanmar armed forces. Then due to these sanctions imposed on Russia, what types of difficulties we are going to face in near future? I just give one example of my journal, which I edit and run. I used to get advertisement from all over the world, from USA, from South Africa, from Turkish companies, and from Russian companies like Rosoboron Export. Day before yesterday, Rosoboron Export sent me a mail for just to publish one advertisement of theirs. I used to publish 2 or 3 per year. And now I am in a deep problem. How they will send the money, and whether if I publish the advertisement and I take the money, whether I will be under sanctions or not. So these are the one part, and another part is that what that professor has left. I intended to like him some questions. That he was telling that Ukraine, Russia had the security concerns. In one part I agree. For Bangladesh, also India raised so many security concerns against us that our Muslim Bengalis had been going to India, this and that, which are absolutely wrong. But Bangladesh never attacked or did anything any harm to India. But if we are attacked, then what would we, should we support it? According to his logic, then Ukraine didn't attack Russia. Russia attacked Ukraine. And another thing, no East European countries, those who were earlier with the Warsaw Pacts, never wanted to join the Russian Federation. Why they want to join European Union and NATO, including Finland, Sweden, and all other countries? Can you please specify? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Shasha, please. Microphone here, please.
Thank you, General. My name is Sasha Bloom and I'm the Acting Deputy High Commissioner of the Australian High Commission. So I just thought I'd share Australia's position on the Russian invasion. So of course Australia thoroughly condemns in the strongest possible terms the illegal, unjust and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. It's a gross violation of international law, including the Charter of the United Nations, and we strongly support Ukraine's sovereignty and its territorial integrity. And we call on Russia to immediately withdraw from Ukrainian territory, consistent with the legally binding decision of the International Court of Justice. It's important that all states comply with the UN norms of peaceful resolution of issues of territorial integrity and of the sovereignty of states. Thank you.
My name is Shafkat Munir. I work for BIPSS. I'm a bit intrigued by Professor Ruhul Amin's comments. I think part of it has already been addressed by Mr. Rusht, so I won't go into that. But especially his categorization that war on terror was a manufactured threat by the West. War on terror happened because of gross acts of terrorism, which were documented, proven, and all of us suffered. Let's not forget that Bangladeshis also died in 9/11. I get very puzzled when we see such comments being bandied about in Bangladesh, that war on terror was manufactured, 9/11 didn't happen, and so on. And it's particularly disappointing when it comes from scholars and professors of international relations. Also, legitimate security interests. Every country has legitimate security interests. Can that justify aggression? Can that justify trampling another nation's sovereignty? I think let's be very clear about these terms, because this is not a talk show, or this is not like a drawing room adda session. We are in a serious academic discussion here. So when we use terms like security interests so loosely, and as Mr. Rusht has very rightly pointed out, we have to be very careful here, because are we in that case actually adding legitimacy to aggression and violation of another nation's sovereignty? And I think we have to be very clear. And please, let's not get into debates about war on terror is manufactured, Afghans were freedom fighters, and so on. Those who carried out attacks on 9/11, in which many Bangladeshis also died, were not freedom fighters. Adages like one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, anachronistic relics of a bygone era. This is 2022. My request, let's wake up and face the new realities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have narrowed down my question to our national perspective. Recently, we have seen the coronavirus pandemic has exposed the dismal order of the world order. The nation has, we have seen that nation has regressed into narrow, selfish policies. Their primary focus has been to acquire hegemony instead of resolving international or global challenges. So in this context, our national motto or our national slogan that the friendship to all and malice to none, how can it be tenable or maintainable? So how far as a state like us can maintain this kind of what should I say, policy in the unfolding events after the pandemic. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now, okay, this will be the very last because we are overshooting our time. Please be very brief.
Okay,
and introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Tanveer. I'm working as a faculty member in the Department of International Relations at University of Dhaka. We often try to make up points as if international order is something that is transforming. But one thing that is persistent in international order, and I do agree with Ashraf Saad that it has changed from being a conglomerate of Christian countries to empires and now to modern nation states. However, one key condition of international order remains the same, that is power principles. The countries that are more powerful tend to have a more higher position in the pecking order. And we always speak in Bangladesh always in terms of external balancing in terms of where we want to go. But balancing does have an internal aspect as well. Unless and until we are willing, unless and until our institutions are strong, I don't necessarily think Bangladesh can tackle the problems that are coming in. We are always talking in terms of external balancing, in terms of which alliances or places we are going to go. But history proves us that as great power rivalry kind of gets more tougher, it will become increasingly difficult for Bangladesh to even make a normal transaction with various countries. That is something we are not necessarily considering. Is our foreign ministry and our institutions able to sustain the kind of consistent engagement that is required for us to face the challenges of the coming days? What is the concept of our economies, where we depend on critical technologies? Do we have an internal capability to develop our research, our technological aspects, or are we going to just jump from one alliances to another and try to do a juggling act and try to engage into these affairs? In order for us to be able to properly address these challenges, Bangladesh first necessarily needs to look inwards as well, because we need to diversify in terms of economics. We mostly speak in terms of how Africa and Latin America is a new ground for Bangladeshi foreign policy and Bangladeshi economic diplomacy to cover, but we aren't covered or we aren't engaged anywhere in that sense to begin with. Neither are we properly engaged with Europe, nor are we properly engaged with our Southeast Asian neighbors, neither are we engaged with any of our neighbors. So we need to look into the very basic ideas of what we do. So in IR 101, what we teach and what we have learned is that never put all your eggs in the same basket. And what we are doing consistently is going to one basket and putting all the eggs there, and when you get kicked out from there, then we are going to put all our eggs in the another basket. That is not how a foreign policy of a country is supposed to be. We need to come up with consistent examples, and we need to come up with a consistent ways of behavior. So our voting patterns in UN perhaps has a consistency in terms of the historical patterns that Bangladesh has followed so far. However, as the days come and as great power rivalry intensifies, where we are going to stay, because as of now, with regards to Ukraine crisis and with regards to some of the emerging issues in international affairs, we see a general confusion in Bangladeshi people. So our position in terms of people to people will vary, and we are confused as to where it should be. But as time goes on and as we see developments coming up, Bangladesh will have to choose which position to choose, or even if we want to engage in some kind of a pragmatic diplomatic efforts, we need to engage our powers as well. Let us not kid ourselves. In 2008, it was not diplomacy that stopped Burmese ships from entering into Bangladesh space. It was our deterrent posture. So unless and until we are able to increase our powers as well, I don't necessarily believe we would be able to take, but rather, I don't believe we would be able to be, or we'd be able to engage international affairs as a active role player, but rather as a silent observer or maybe someone who just is passive in terms of how international structure is going to be. If we want to be active, we have to change ourselves. That's what I want.
Thank you, Tanveer. I kind of agree with quite a bit of what you said, so we'll come back to that later. So we will now go back to our panelists. Please take about 3 to 5 minutes. So respond in general. Thank you so much. We'll first go to you, Touhid.
Okay, there are 2 questions specifically addressed to me, so let me reply to those, and then maybe 1 or 2 more. I'll just go generally. Morality. Sorry, it's a different, totally different thing. When a teacher say, you and your friend, if you are selfish among your friends, you will be ostracized. But when it's a question of international relations, if you are looking after only your country's interest, you won't be ostracized. That's your job to do. Okay, so morality, the veneer of morality often comes into play in international relations, but in reality, it is, going back to the realists, it is actually your interest that becomes supreme. I will relate this to the Australian DHC's comment also. Of course, what Russia has done is condemnable. There is no doubt about that. They have violated the international and the sovereignty of a country. But again, mind you, again, you are doing this because it goes with your interests also. Similar things happened in the Middle East. Australia did not condemn, nor did many other countries. Ultimately, it's the interest that matters. Next question is about the equipment. I know that we are, it's not only Russia, you know it very well that we are, our dependence on China is basically unhealthy almost, because we have seen that we have, now think of a situation in which you have a, I hope it will not happen, you have a conflict with Myanmar. What happens to you? Both your suppliers are staunch supporters of Myanmar. We must, I have already mentioned this during my speech also, and there are other points which, because of positive time, I could not. We must diversify our sources of hardware. And we must go into some research and manufacturing also. I believe that we have that capability, particularly with the high-tech things. There was proposal from Turkey to enter into many of their projects, including the drones. What decided the outcome of the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan? It was Turkish drones. These things should be actually carefully taken into consideration, and we should go into those things. Well, you do some cannibalization and then things like that, or you procure some goods in a clandestine way. These things happen all over the world, so this is not very unusual. And have I? Another 1 minute. 1 minute, okay. He had initially spoken about one thing, market independence from aid dependence. Yes. You see, when we buy something, we become dependent. When we sell something, we also become dependent. Now, this we have to get out of these things. We should not actually be only stitching shirts. I said in one occasion that, well, you cannot go to the high table just stitching shirts. You have to do other things. If you diversify, you become, others become dependent on you, as the world has become dependent on China, or for many of the goods. Very mundane goods, but then they are such big suppliers that others have become dependent on them. Neocolonialism, actually it is always there. The colonialism itself was also for resources. And the neocolonialism that we have now is also for resources. Only it is no longer profitable to occupy a country and run that country. So colonialism has gone. Colonialism has not gone because of high morality. It has gone because it became unprofitable. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. There are more of comments and less questions, but I found that there are a few ones. It's good to have some discussions. I'll begin with what Shafkat has said, and I fully agree with you. I mean, well, let's try to understand things academically. I mean, when it comes to the discussions of global war on terrorism and the terrorism discourse, I find that in the terrorism studies literature, there are two schools of thought. One is the orthodox and the traditional IR and security studies scholars, 95% of them. They argue that terrorism is primarily a non-state activity directed against the state. So a state has the valid reasons to come very heavily against the terrorists. So what 9/11 happened is a fact, not a conspiracy theory. Violent extremists deserve more attention from international actors and etc. But there are 5% academics like Noam Chomsky. Think about Noam Chomsky, American MIT faculty member. There are Marxist-oriented critical theorists who believe that states often reproduce violence and terror and manufacture to legitimize their military-industrial complex. So maybe I see this debate when he said that I don't agree with Professor Ulamin, but I see this, him coming from a romanticist position, a Marxist critical theory maybe, and referring to ontology. I think he was referring to something else. So I think it's good to have an informed debate on that. But I think that the large majority of people in the international system do agree that global war on terrorism is a war against transnational actors and non-state actors and terrorists. Tanveer made something interesting that there is a need for soul searching, and we need to have an inward-looking assessment, like to what extent are we capable of dealing with the foreign policy challenges, and he was referring to foreign ministry and other institutions making decisions, and to what extent we are strengthening them. Definitely, what I understand is that there are different desks in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Each has a very well-researched team of young and DGs, directors. They do work very hard. They do assess things very, very, very passionately. And then what is missing here is that we have a, we don't know to what extent our decisions are.
Connection with the IR department.
Right. I mean, right. Excellent. What I was saying is that globally, and in fact in the global north, there is a good practice of informed decision makings. Decisions are made on the basis of a lot of information, research and inputs from civil societies and think tanks and academics. We lack that culture. So it is not only the MOFA that needs reform, it is us that also needs reform. And part of this, us not having the capacity and the delivery of the research is that we lack the access to the data. So the government also needs to have a paradigm shift in terms of opening the archives and giving access to the academics in terms of, so that they can have research and inform the policy making. Sean, I think his comment was well addressed in terms of vaccine diplomacy and new colonialism. Ambassador Touhid has rightly said that new colonialism is partly about economic benefits. Air Vice Marshal Mahmood did not, it was not a question, I think it was more of a remark that coming from three different, right, coming from three different theories, we can get three different policy imperatives. We need a strong military deterrence that should come from a realist perspective. And also, he is true that when I talked about the global governance and the liberal schools international order definition, I missed the regional part. So definitely, it is also a very strong foreign policy priority for Bangladesh to go regional, and then, developing and strengthening institutions. So we tried with SARC, it failed. We are now trying with BIPSS-DHAKA. We are trying with BCIM and BBIN, but here also great power and external power influence comes in, because we see the differing agenda. BCIM is seen more to be a China-driven regionalism, and BIPSS-DHAKA is seen more as an India-driven regional initiative. So we need to find a good position for us, right, to revitalize these institutions and making our interest well achieved. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your last comments. It has been a very rich discussion, I must say, and we all agree, and we go back from here much enriched than we came here in the afternoon. And it is a given fact that the international system is in a flux. The fluidity in the international system gives a lot of challenges to countries like Bangladesh and small states. It does also offer opportunities, because we can reassess, reposition, and also gain strength. One thing that the Secretary very rightly mentioned, that all states have interests. They have permanent interests, no permanent friends. And like any other country, we should also not have a permanent friend. We should only have permanent interest. And that's the way to go. And having realist tendencies, I fully agree with Tanveer that one of the key capabilities that Bangladesh needs to address is our capacity for deterrence. There is no alternative to deterrence. And in terms of opportunities, I see that many of the countries are now realigning themselves, repositioning themselves in the international system. So we also must reassess our positions. We have tremendous opportunities of shaping policies in the global commons like the cyberspace, where even smaller states can put their input and shape a policy that comes to the benefit of small states. Our challenges are also going to come from the maritime space that we are involved in, because we are a maritime nation. We should never forget that Bangladesh is a key maritime nation in the Indian Ocean. We are one of the gatekeepers to the Bay of Bengal. We provide key access to the Bay of Bengal. We can either provide access or we can deny access. So we have tremendous capacity as a maritime nation. That should be not taken as a challenge, but translated into our benefit. Well, these are many, many food for thought, but I would like to thank you again for being with us this afternoon to talk on an issue which is very, very pertinent for not only Bangladesh, but everybody in the region and beyond. Please come to our events in future. We always exchange very meaningful exchanges with you, which are of tremendous benefits as we research on these issues. So please join me in thanking our panelists and join us for a cup of tea outside. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here with us today.